Okay, so what do you need? Besides a miracle. Guns. Lots of guns. 1999's The Matrix by the Wachowskis. Wow. There are three dimensions on which this film scores highly: storytelling, visuals, and philosophy. I'm going to gloss over storytelling except to say that they've got the magic juice here. The story, the characters, their motivations, the forces of antagonism, the efficiency and functionality of the scenes, the dialogue beats, they're all great. Visuals. This film takes seriously the art of cinema. The moving pictures in this flick are eye-popping. It features groundbreaking visual effects, including the popularly known bullet time. It set a trend which continues today with color altering, and most of the CGI doesn't look bad today, 20 years later. And the exposition is neatly woven into great-looking scenes. Take, for example, the martial arts duel between student Neo and Guru Morpheus. How did I beat you? Philosophy. In 1999, a virtual reality dystopia was a brilliant way to talk to audiences about Plato's allegory of the cave. Here is a popular blockbuster throwing audiences into the deep end of metaphysics and epistemology. What is the nature of reality? Is the universe deterministic and all of our fates predetermined? This, combined with themes of control and resistance, made The Matrix deeply resonate with misfit hacker types, and basically every adolescent to adult male in the West. Christ allegory, Eastern religion, Alice in Wonderland, hero's journey, it's all there. The Matrix versus The Dark Knight was comparing apples to apples, so the results are interesting. 68% went for The Dark Knight. You hear that, Mr. Anderson? That is the sound of inevitability. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
Why does it cry, Smeagol? Cruel men hurts us. The dread pirate rabbits twixt us. Of course it did. I told you they was tricksy.
Peter Jackson's 2001 The Fellowship of the Ring was an ambitious retelling of author J.R.R. Tolkien's hallowed novel. Especially for the non-book readers, of which I was regrettably one at the time, I believe that the stakes were very high, in particular for the opening scene, but Peter Jackson really delivered the goods. Impeccably narrated by Cate Blanchett's character Galadriel, the opening sequence provided an introduction and brief history of Middle-earth with an emphasis on the history and legend of the One Ring itself and its maker, the Dark Lord Sauron. We learn about the different races and inhabitants of this land, including the ominous and foreboding knowledge that the race of men in particular is so easily seduced by the power of the ring. We also learn of each ring bearer leading up to Frodo. This film and its source material is so cherished in part because of its robust thematic elements. There's loyalty, with Samwise Gamgee in particular. After the presumed fall of Gandalf, Galadriel takes measure of the remaining members of the Fellowship, looks at Sam, and says, "Yet hope remains while company is true." Courage and heroism can come from unexpected places. Frodo himself is no great warrior, and he's never been outside of the Shire when he volunteers to bear the ring. Unity and fellowship in the face of an existential threat. The races of Middle-earth harbor petty differences between them, and can easily give in to uncharitable stereotypes of each other, and this is exacerbated by the presence of the One Ring. Why is this film important to me? I'll try to be brief. In college, I took a summer course called Studies in Tolkien. We read The Hobbit, the entire Lord of the Rings saga, and portions of the Silmarillion in 3 weeks. This course remains my all-time favorite academic experience, and I'm indebted to a certain educator who shepherded me and my classmates through it. I was also fortunate as a graduate student to participate in a study abroad trip in Oxford, England, where Tolkien lived and taught. A highlight of that trip for me was visiting a pub called the Eagle and Child, where Tolkien met with and discussed literature with fellow enthusiasts, including C.S. Lewis. This informal discussion group became known as the Inklings. The Fellowship of the Ring is visually stunning and aesthetically gorgeous. It's also surprisingly funny. It comes in pints. I'm getting one. I can't adequately put into words how spectacular Howard Shore's Academy Award-winning score is, but I will say that it is such a terrific compliment, not only in striking the right notes as they relate to the plot, also in fleshing out the races we're introduced to and the distinctive lands they inhabit. I especially love the light, happy notes of concerning hobbits, as the viewer is introduced to the Shire and the race of hobbits, and the ethereal mini-meetings as we see the elven city of Rivendell in all its splendor and majesty. It's an inspiring, hopeful, and life-affirming film. Despite the fracturing in the Fellowship in the film's closing scene and the grieving of Boromir, Sam dramatically displays his allegiance to Frodo. Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee. And I don't mean to. And then Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas decide that they will not abandon Merry and Pippin to torment and death. There's a great exchange between Gandalf and Frodo that resonates with the calamities of our time, but also perhaps with existence and humanity as a whole. Frodo, in a moment of despair, tells Gandalf, "I wish that the ring had never come to me. I wish that none of this had happened." Gandalf responds by saying, "So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." Fellowship falls by the narrowest of margins, losing by a count of 40 votes to 41 votes against The Princess Bride.
Laugh it up, fuzzball. The Empire Strikes Back, directed by Irving Kershner, is a personal and nostalgic favorite, and also a great and important film. I can't talk about everything, so I want to go deep on what I think makes The Empire Strikes Back great, and that is that it deepens Star Wars emotionally and spiritually. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. In Luke's spiritual training, we learn more about what it means to be a Jedi Knight, we learn more about the Force, and that alone makes this movie engrossing. The first film, Star Wars: A New Hope, established an exciting Arthurian legend in an imaginative space setting. The second installment furthers the adventure, of course, and expands the universe. But it goes further than that. It also surfaces a surprisingly complementary emotional core. It further develops the principal characters of Luke, Han, and Leia, and Darth Vader. But I want to talk mostly about Luke and Vader. The Luke Vader revelation scene is perhaps the most famous scene in cinema, and I see two important things going on there. First, it's an emotional and shocking twist, revealing to audiences what Star Wars has been all about the whole time, right under their noses. Luke was warned about the danger of the dark side, and he saw in his failure at the cave that he could become like Darth Vader. Then he learns that Vader is his own father, furthering the fear that he might follow in his footsteps. Add to that Vader taking Luke's hand, and him replacing it with a robot one. Will Luke become more machine than man, twisted and evil, the same as Obi-Wan said of Vader? And notice that in A New Hope, Luke wears white, in Empire he wears gray, and in Jedi he wears black, signifying his progression from naive idealism to the reality of conflict, and finally toward the deathly specter of Darth Vader's black suit. And secondly, this important scene humanizes Vader. It brings home the fact that he is not a faceless mask or a soulless machine, but he is a twisted person. Vader simply would not be cinema's greatest villain if he were merely a droid, as he might appear to be from his suit. No, actually, he's your dad. And so Star Wars is not only about the grand conflict between good and evil, but is also a personal conflict between fathers and sons. As it turns out, a death mark's not an easy thing to live with. General Riken, more like Captain Obvious. The Shawshank Redemption, with 2/3 of the vote, had this film on the run. So it looks like it's time for Empire to fix the hyperdrive and regroup with the rebels. They told me they fixed it. It's not my fault. Would it help if I got out and pushed? It might.
The Sandlot is a 1993 coming-of-age cult classic. I love the setup for this story, as the narrator relates how Babe Ruth once called his shot before hitting a towering home run. That's how he became a legend. Cut to Benny rounding the bases and getting caught in a pickle, a situation in baseball which base runners rarely survive. This sets the stage for the biggest pickle any of us had ever seen, and how Benny became a neighborhood legend. This film is ageless in some respects. It captures a good chunk of many 12-year-old boys' experience. Scotty Smalls moves to a new town at the end of the 5th grade. and the deck is stacked against him in terms of making new friends. We learn that his real father died when he was a little kid, and his mother recently remarried to a man who doesn't yet know how to relate to him. He also doesn't know how to throw or catch a baseball. Perhaps even worse yet, he's never even heard of Babe Ruth, the idol of the Sandlot boys. His mother is so concerned about him that she encourages him to get into trouble, for crying out loud. You have my permission. How many mothers do you know who would say something like that to their son? Well, none mothers, I guess. His prospects for fitting in seem quite hopeless. One of the themes of the film is social acceptance and the role, for right or wrong, that sports plays into that acceptance. But perhaps even more importantly, the difference that one kind-hearted, charitable friend can make. Enter Benjamin Franklin Rodriguez, who is on the Mount Rushmore of cinema's all-time greatest friends category. Here's Benny the Jet's great friend resume. Benny manages to miraculously teach Smalls how to play baseball, and thus gain acceptance with the rest of the boys. Benny is so selfless that he expresses regret after having busted the guts off of a baseball, because it means that the group can't continue to play the rest of the day, and then congratulates Smalls on hitting his first ever home run, which means, among other more important things, that the group can't continue to play ball the rest of the day. And as soon as Benny realizes what Smalls has done, aced a ball to the beast that's worth, well, more than your whole life, man, he immediately marshals the troops to try to save Small's hide. And finally, when the beast proves too much for the wily machinations of the boys, Benny reels off the legendary deed of pickling the beast, in theory risking life and limb in order to retrieve a lost ball. Another theme of the film is wonder or awe, and the beast is a great example. The legend of the beast goes back a long time, before any of us could even pick up a baseball. And then there's the fact that things aren't always what they seem when you are coming of age. And again, the Beast is an example of this. He's a lonely, misunderstood mastiff who's understandably desperate for play after having been chained up for so long. And Mr. Myrtle, who was presumably, per Squints, the meanest old man who ever lived. Why don't you just knock on the door? I've gotten it for you. The song selections are on point throughout the film. This magic moment when Squints makes his desperate, ill-fated move on Wendy, Tequila, when the boys get progressively sicker on the ride, culminating in projectile vomiting, Wipeout during Benny's mad scramble away from the beast, and Ray Charles' inimitable rendition of America the Beautiful during the night game on the 4th of July. This is where the Cinderella story comes to an end, though, as Forrest Gump narrowly triumphs 43 votes to 38. I was really pleased to see Sandlot make this deep run, but the Sandlot got really into the 60s, and no one ever saw it again.